guys! As part of my back to school series last year on my channel, I filmed a video just about advice that I had for high school freshmen or ninth graders if you're not from the US. Ninth grade is when you are like 14, turning 15, and the next year after that is sophomore year, which is 10th grade, and you're going from 15 to 16 years old. And so I thought I would do advice videos for each of the next consecutive grades in high school, with sophomore year being the year where you're not really the youngest in high school anymore. At least in my personal experience, that's the year when the competitiveness and competition between people for getting good grades and comparing each other sort of begins then. The coursework that you are getting is definitely more challenging than previous years, and it's also just sort of an awkward in-between year where friend groups are changing and expanding, shifting. You might experience some drama. I found that sophomore year was really the year most people solidified their really close high school friends. My first piece of advice for anyone going into their 10th grade year in high school is to get more serious about everything. You really want to invest time in things that you love, both in your coursework and in your extracurricular activities. In your activities, you really want to start honing in and narrowing down on the things that you really enjoy doing and maybe invest more time in those things. You might want to end up in a position where you can eventually have a leadership position. You definitely want to start just increasing your level of involvement. In addition, you also want to sort of branch out, take different classes that are challenging to you, maybe that are new subjects, and that can both help you sort of find your interests. And if they are challenging, like IB or AP classes, then those also look good as increased course rigor for your college applications. This next piece of advice for 10th graders is something that I was sort of reluctant to do as a sophomore, but I'm really glad my parents encouraged me to do so, and that is to keep track of all sorts of things. You want to keep a list, maybe in a notebook, or making a formal resume of all sorts of things you've done throughout your career in high school. So this list can even be started your freshman year and then just added onto as the years go by. You want to add things like honors, awards, with the year and date that those were received, your extracurricular activities with the number of years, your level of involvement, notable titles or your projects. You want to also keep track of community service. Getting involved in volunteering is a wonderful, rewarding experience. I would absolutely recommend to anyone, no matter what age. But if you're writing all of this into a list, it's also important to keep track of the number of hours if that's something that your school encourages. And I would also write down anything else that you spend your time doing, whether it's a job, part-time, over the summer, maybe a summer program or a camp you were involved in, different information like that, or honor societies, all sorts of things. And this is something that will really help you down the road when you're applying to colleges or you're applying for a job or something like that, where you need a resume or just a list of all the different things you spent your time doing in high school. It's also very, very useful when you're applying to college because they ask you for these sorts of things on the application itself, and this way you can't forget any of the details surrounding your time in high school. If you are taking the PSAT your 10th grade year, I would absolutely recommend you taking it seriously and not blowing it off. You don't really need to worry as much about studying and over preparing for the test itself, because it really matters your junior year or 11th grade year, but it's a really good indicator of how well you would do on the actual SAT, and this sort of is a really good way for you to sort of gauge where you are in terms of your score on the PSAT, and that can sort of let you know how much in advance you need to study for the SAT or any other standardized test should you decide to take that the next school year. During 10th grade, I would absolutely recommend taking more responsibility for different areas of your life. You want to stay accountable for your own assignments, doing your homework, not procrastinating, and just doing the best you can without relying on others to remind you. You also want to make sure you're thinking about preparation for eventually learning to drive and all sorts of other things that may come up throughout the year. It's just something to consider and think about as you move through the school year. This next piece of advice is really something I would recommend to absolutely everyone and anyone, no matter how old they are, and that is to keep a very consistent sleep schedule. I know that my workload sophomore year was really a lot, and I had a ton going on. I put a lot of pressure on myself, and I was working really, really hard late into the night, and so I wasn't really getting enough sleep consistently at all, and that sort of changed halfway through the year when I discovered the study community on Tumblr, and I started learning how other students really succeeded by sleeping a lot and sleeping regularly, and so I began to sort of adjust my schedule based on that, and it worked wonders. So I would absolutely recommend that. I have some videos I'll link down below on like how to be a morning person and how to sort of get to sleep earlier if you're interested in that. Even though it's a little bit early, I would definitely recommend at least beginning to research and look up different universities that you may be interested in going to eventually. I started the college search my freshman year just because my parents really wanted me to avoid having to stress out about it last minute, and I'm very, very grateful that they did that because I was able to sort of relax my junior year and not really freak out about not knowing what I wanted to do with my life. I would absolutely start by looking locally, maybe at community colleges or schools that are within your home state, province, or area, just because those are going to be closest to home and you might have easiest access to going on a college visit like that weekend or something like that, just because it might be closer. I would also recommend using YouTube and formal virtual tours to save time and money when touring schools, because it can be really difficult to visit a university if it's across the country or if you just don't have time off from school, so that's always a good option. I would also visit schools mostly so you can get like the vibe and explore the surroundings of the campus itself. Definitely check out my How I Chose My University video for other categories and things to consider when choosing schools both that you are applying to and then choosing your school that you will be attending. And doing all of this 10th grade is really helpful because it gives you an idea of what you're aiming for and can avoid like a shock towards the end of 11th grade. If you know that the schools you're aiming for require really, really high and competitive grades and SAT scores, then you know that you need to work really, really hard and make sure that you're meeting those standards so you have a chance of being admitted to that school. And if this is something that you think is unnecessary at the time of 10th grade, then you can always push it off to junior year, but I think it's always important to be prepared and starting early. My last piece of advice to any underclassmen out there is to always talk to older kids and upperclassmen that you know, that you've maybe met through an extracurricular or that you see at lunch or in the library or something like that, because they can give you really specific advice about different classes and like the teachers that teach them at your school, and really specific advice that will really help you the most at your school, because every single school, even across a local area, can be so different in how the classes operate and what you should take and how competitive it is there, all sorts of factors. So I would absolutely recommend doing that.